I've been looking for freedom. I've been looking so long. I've been looking for freedom. And still the search goes on. So this past weekend was a national holiday here in Germany. Like every year on the 3rd of October, we celebrate here Tag der Deutschen Einheit, the day we celebrate when the gods sent us the chosen one, David Hasselhoff, to come and liberate the German peoples, to sing to us with his tales of his search of freedom. I've been looking for freedom. Okay, so there's maybe more to it than just celebrating David Hasselhoff Day, but he did play quite a big part there during the celebrations a year before unification. Of course, what is being celebrated is the so-called reunification of Germany. It happened on the 3rd of October 1990, so this year has marked 30 years of German unity. I say reunification in that there was never really a reunification, it was a unification of sorts of the two parts of a divided Germany that had been divided into the German Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic of Germany during the Cold War. But a reunification wasn't quite right because the borders are in fact, of course, new borders. The borders of Germany and the German empires over time have always been, let's say, very fluid. They have changed over time, and this is actually a new Germany that we have now, but it's the accepted Federal Republic of Germany as it has stood since 1990, as I say, for 30 years now. Unification back in 1990, of course, involved the annexing of the former states of the German Democratic Republic, those being incorporated into the Federal Republic of Germany, the 5 new Bundesländer of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Sachsen, Sachsen-Anhalt, Thüringen, and Brandenburg, and of course the eastern part of Berlin was merged with the western part of Berlin to form the current state city of Berlin. And it's interesting to note, as I mentioned in the introduction, that the 3rd of October this year fell on a Saturday, and that's a very interesting point as to how we do things very differently in the UK to in Germany. We have the term in the UK Bank Holiday Monday. Bank holiday is just another term for a national holiday because it's days on which the banks are closed. What is meant by that is basically just a national holiday. National holidays in the UK, if they have a fixed date, they are generally moved to the nearest Monday, so that every time there's a national holiday, effectively people who work from Monday to Friday get a long weekend, whether the day would normally fall on a Wednesday, Thursday, or indeed on a weekend. And this is not the same in Germany. The national holiday, the Feiertag, was a Saturday this time, and it's just a lost national holiday for those who work from Monday to Friday. People in retail, of course, had the Saturday off, and we have a long weekend where all the shops are closed. In 2004, the 3rd of October also fell on a weekend. It was in fact a Sunday, and apparently the government of the time under Gerhard Schröder were considering plans to change the rules on this specific national holiday. They wanted to make the celebrations fall on the first Sunday of October each year instead of taking the 3rd of October and potentially a working day. That year they were facing a potential budget deficit, and it was thought that by making the national holiday fall on a Sunday each year and not on potentially on a working day, that they could save something like 500 million euros in tax revenue. Ultimately, the plans were very unpopular and were discarded as soon as they came to light and were published. I've been looking for freedom. There are, of course, official celebrations every year, but I say there are official celebrations. My impressions, having lived here in Germany for 11 years. My impressions are that it's not really a popular celebration. It's not something that you will find families and friends getting together to celebrate necessarily. It's not to be compared with the 4th of July in the USA, for example, or even, in my experience, the The Day of the Canary Islands is also celebrated. Families take off the day and get together and celebrate it. The Tag der Deutschen Einheit is not even something you will find typically celebrated at bars or clubs or pubs or whatever. You're more likely to encounter a special night at a nightclub for Halloween, for example, which is indeed more an Anglo-Saxon tradition. I've been looking for freedom. There are, as I say, official celebrations. The state, of course, wants to mark this important day, which, thinking about it, even though it's not something that's really turned into a popular tradition that people don't celebrate privately, it's a very important day, not only for Germany, but for the whole of the world. And if you want to see a video that I made about this and Germany during the Cold War and how Germany was the centre of the world really on lots of occasions, and this symbolic idea of a divided world, a divided Germany, you can click on this link now. I thought that was quite an interesting video partly about German reunification. Have a look at that after you've watched this one maybe. So yeah, it's important, and there are state celebrations, of course. There is a state ceremony, and the host of the celebrations each year is the capital city of the Bundesland, the federal state, which is the current chair of the Bundesrat. That's one of the organs of government in Germany, which is the coordination of the federal states. And it's the host, the chair of the Bundesrat, which revolves. It's a revolving, alternating system, which is regulated by the Königsteiner Agreement, Königsteiner Vereinbarung, who is the host, and this year it is in fact Potsdam as the capital of Brandenburg. So that's where the official state ceremony took place this past Saturday on the 3rd of October itself. It's also been, this year there has been a whole 30 days of celebrations, right from the 5th of September to the 4th of October, 30 days marking 30 years of unification. That included what's known as the Einheitsexpo, 3.5 kilometers circuit, a Rundgang as the Germans say, a walk around with stands, catering stands, live music. There's also been a tree planting campaign, for instance, at what is normally known as the Deutschlandfest. I've been looking for freedom. Now this is where my German viewers can contribute to the discussion and make comments down below in the comments section, because my impression here, having lived here a long time, is that this day doesn't really generate any strong feeling, any strong national feeling. There are no celebrations like you might typically see in the USA, where the people all get together on the 4th of July to celebrate their independence. This is nothing really comparable. I think in general everybody thinks that unification itself was a good thing. Whether it was the correct way to go about it or not is a different matter, but certainly the opening of borders and freedom of movement for people who didn't enjoy any freedom of movement for so much time, the removal of the Berlin Wall, of course, these are all positive things. Where you may still find strong opinion, strong feeling is on the matter of whether Germany is truly reunited. Of course, it is one state, but is Germany in fact just as divided as ever? You just have to compare the unemployment statistics even 30 years after unification and 30 years of paying what is known as the Solidaritätszuschlag, solidarity supplement. We in the West are still paying right until this is going to be abolished in the coming year, 2021. But for this time, and it's actually has been going on longer than the initially planned period, we pay 5.5% of our wages as a supplement aimed at building and reconstructing infrastructure in the East. It's a way of redressing the balance, the perceived rich West and the poor East. The West were expected to contribute to the rebuilding of the East, and this has been going on, as I say, for 30 years now, and will finally be abolished next year. So even after all this time, the unemployment figures in the East stand at 7.3% and only 5.5% in the West, so there's very much a discrepancy. You also have to consider that not only are the unemployment figures much higher in the East than in the West, but this was much more of an impact on the East than we can probably even imagine here in the West, because during the times of the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, they had of course 100% full employment. The economic system was obviously quite different to the free market system that we have now. So if the women in the GDR were particularly hard hit, because there was also not only full employment for anybody seeking employment, but also a comprehensive network of childcare facilities enabling women to go to work, and really from one day to the next this was completely wiped out. So there's no doubt a lot of feeling of insecurity in the East. I think that always goes hand in hand. If you look at the political map also, it's in the East where the populist right AfD has its most success, and some of the more populist right movements there, and that's no coincidence. In times of insecurity, it's generally directly proportional. The higher the unemployment, the higher the appeal, and the better the success of the populist right parties. The other side of the coin is of course that the Linke, the party of the traditional left, which also has partially its origins in the old Socialist Party of the East, the PDS and the SED, ultimately the party of the Eastern German state, and that's where it also has its has more success. So there is also some nostalgia for times gone by. And in fact, I would say that with the unification of Germany, there is much reason for East Germans to feel that they threw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, unification was good and necessary, and the East German state committed a lot of crimes. It was very undemocratic, but it also had a lot of good things going for it. I would argue to this day that a comprehensive network of childcare facilities to allow women to go into full-time employment is something desperately needed in the West today. I've been looking for freedom. So I definitely get the impression, I get the feeling of a country which is on many levels still very divided. I mentioned the Solidaritätszuschlag a while ago, the solidarity supplement that we pay here in the West, and it's another thing that leads to, if not division, resentment, particularly here in the Ruhrgebiet, the Ruhr Valley area, where we have much higher employment in many areas than in the East. We also have very, very old infrastructure. We have roads, travel, transport systems which are really in need of renewing, really in need of some work and some modernization, but we are still here paying solidarity supplement. So in this region, certainly amongst some people, there is a feeling of resentment and also an idea that enough is enough. We've paid enough now to help build the infrastructure in the East. They have the most modern roads, the most modern railway stations, everything's pretty okay. We've got more unemployment here in the Ruhr Valley area, and it's time now to invest in some of those critical areas, particularly here in poorer areas of the Ruhrgebiet. So I'd love to hear your opinions on this matter down below. Is Germany still divided? Is there resentment in the West now for the East? Are we on an equal playing field, or what has to be done to make Germany a more equal place and not the divided land that it still is? And also, on a lighter note, what making this video has made me realize is that I have spent very little time in the new Bundesländer. I have visited Eastern Berlin. The one time that I went to Berlin, I was at a festival on the Bleilochtalsperre, and I'm going to say that's Saxony-Anhalt. You see, I'm very ignorant. I'm very much a child of the West, the wild, wild West, tief im Westen here in the Ruhrgebiet. So I would like to make sure, one thing I noticed when I left the UK, I left with a sense that I hadn't travelled enough and seen all of the UK that I wanted to see. And I vowed to myself, particularly now during the pandemic that we have, where our travel is limited, where we can forget our tendency to travel to Spain or whatever, to go off to warmer climes, and it's really a time we should be exploring maybe our local environment, and certainly our own country. And I would very much like to go and visit parts of the East. I think they have some areas of natural beauty, some really beautiful cities. I'd like to visit Potsdam, talking about the capital of Brandenburg being the host of the official celebrations this year. I think I've only heard people say this. I've never been myself, but I think it's a place worth visiting. And I'd also like to hear your recommendations. What are the most recommended places? What are the places that I absolutely have to visit in the new Bundesländer in Eastern Germany? Let me know down below. I think I need to get in my car and go and discover the East and see for myself whether this country is unified or divided. Thank you very much anyway for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please remember to leave me a thumbs up, and also if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And at this point I would also like to thank from the bottom of my heart my patrons, my supporters on Patreon that help me with a small donation every month, and that way also get exclusive access to exclusive content. If that interests you, check the link down below, and otherwise I will see you here on YouTube, as ever, regularly here, my videos on YouTube. Thanks very much for watching. Macht's gut, Leute. I've been looking for freedom. I've been looking so long. I've been looking for freedom. Still the search goes on.